Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome back to the Doomer Optimism podcast. We are having this part of Twitter slash in-group discussion today with Brooke and Grin, and I've just typically started the conversation by having people introduce themselves because I find it to be very awkward when people try to introduce other people and then say like, did I get that right? So Brooke, you go first, then Grin, and then we'll just jump into basically a vibe camp discussion. And I just want to highlight that Jason is here with us as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us on. So my name is Brooke. I am GPT Brooke on Twitter. I have lived pretty unconventional and wild life. When I first joined Twitter, I thought I was going to be known for like overcoming addiction and homelessness and things like that. But then I did some things, and now people kind of want to talk about vibe camp more than that. So that's pretty exciting. Grin and I both helped organize a very large festival that I'm sure we're going to get into more detail on later. But yeah, I'm kind of just a very happy, friendly, and very excitable person.
Hey, yeah, and
Nice. Grin?
yep, I'm Grin. I am, I work I've always worked kind of for myself in startups. I work in crypto now. I work for a company called Library, and I met Brooke on Twitter about almost a year ago now, right when you first tweeted that, hey, we should do this vibe camp thing. And we've been working on it together ever since.
That's so fun. Okay, so let's just start because I don't know what the Venn diagram looks like of Doomer Optimism Twitter and in-group Twitter. So just describe what Vibe Camp is like as an introductory description, and then we can go into more detail.
Sure. So it's a little bit difficult to describe because I think it is kind of a new thing. It wasn't quite a conference, but it had some elements of that. It wasn't quite a festival, but it had some elements of that. We basically drew together kind of like a number of disparate but overlapping communities that we had met largely through Twitter, although there were some people who did not have Twitter presences there. And I think because of the pandemic and how much people have been seeking connection, I think it just kind of struck a chord. And we ended up having a little over 400 people there for our very first event, which was pretty cool. It was a kind of a mix of different styles. We had some, we took some from Burning Man. We had a lot of the content there was brought by attendees. It was hosted at a kind of like a children's summer camp during their off season, and so we had some just adults, like hatchet throwing and archery and the zip line and things like that, where everybody could kind of just play. And then we did a lot, some of the content the attendees brought were things more like the workshops, or there was a speed friending event. There were also some dance parties and circling and things like that. And it was a 2-night thing in March. Is there anything you want to add to that, Gren?
No, I think that was good. I think so. I don't know much about Doomer Optimism, but I kind of read about it a little bit. One potential place where I think there might be overlap is I do think there is this feeling of optimism that came out of Vibe Camp. This feeling that not like, things are definitely going to be great, but more like we have an opportunity. And if we, put in the work, there's something really cool we can do here together.
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think like binds all of these people together. Like what is the common thread in this part of Twitter in group? I know that there's one thread that were, heavy rationalists, and then they went post-rationalist, and I've known about post-rats for a while, but there's a lot of people who I don't think went through that kind of wormhole or, pipeline. And so I'm just curious, like why are all these people on the internet, this part of Twitter, why are they meeting each other? Like what is kind of sparking their interest in each other that makes them want to actually now meet in person?
Do you have a response off the top of your head, Grant? Or you want me to try to respond to that?
No, I don't. So you and I have kind of joined this in-group thing roughly around the same time. And there's no formal joining. You just kind of show up and it speaks to you, you vibe with it, and then you participate more. There isn't, or there wasn't, I don't know if there is now, but there's not some sort of reward or prize for being part of in-group besides just being there. So most people do it because it feels good. It's what they want to do. So I think that's like the thing that connects everyone. It might be eligibility is a big one. People talk about it a lot. So this idea that like you can't from the outside see what all the core details are that are going on.
Maybe that's not a good question because I'm trying to make you legible. So that's maybe not a good question.
Yeah, this was a challenge with Vibe Camp. A lot of people were like, well, don't label us, like don't ask who is in group and who wants to come, and don't bring this kind of stuff out to the greater public.
I would say some of the more prominent ones in my mind are things like a sense of like not quite fitting in with mainstream society, whatever that is for you. This kind of like shared sense of like we're kind of all a little bit weird. And then also for a lot of people, I think there's things like curiosity and for a lot of people, kindness and just is to the degree like inclusiveness and just wanting to meet more people, wanting to learn from people, wanting to share experiences with people. And that doesn't apply to everybody, but I think those are some pretty prominent ones in my mind.
Yeah, and evidently being a software engineer, something like 90% of people who came are software devs.
I've noticed that.
But here's something I've noticed as an outsider. There is like this weird dialectic, I guess, between legibility and illegibility. Like, because what was crazy to me as an outsider, and also I'm a sociologist and an ethnographer, so I'm like always just looking at trends and like culture and all this stuff. So I was so curious how Vibe Camp was going to go, because I study these like all sorts of alternative communities, and so much writing about it afterwards, like, or during or before, like what is it going to be, and then like there's hints that there's like things happening privately, you don't really know exactly what it is, maybe it's a joke, maybe it's real, and then there's like so much processing. Like I feel like there's this processing culture, like it's good to think about these things out loud and to be legible in some ways. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts about that. I mean, obviously you don't want to speak for everybody, but like if you noticed this, dialectic going on.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that really contributed to Vibe Camp even becoming a thing. I really do think it's an important ways we named it into reality. And I think the fact that my natural inclination is to just tweet about like pretty much every passing thought I have, it really helped in this regard, because I'm like, wait, I got this idea, or I got this idea, or somebody said this, and then people would kind of chime in, and it made the process, I think, for a lot of people feel a lot more like engaging and collaborative, and they were kind of part of building it, which I think, and lead up and talking about it beforehand, and it was kind of like this shared experience. I think is a part of that processing thing that I think brought people together a lot.
Yeah, I think there's an idea that like events start before they start, right? Like Vibe Camp started on April 4th, but it really started sometime in September when we said we were going to do it. And because we have this cool thing like Twitter, and because, like you said, people are very happy to talk about whatever is going on with them, it's kind of like we've been doing it together for months before we even got there. And even when we got there, there were, 4 or 5 days of kind of pre-parties, people doing stuff before, Airbnbs, people rented out before the actual Vibe Camp. So Vibe Camp almost is like the end of this thing, but also the beginning of then the next phase.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Doomer Optimism, because I think for a lot of us, it's almost like we're imagining publicly, or we're having friendships out loud, and like a lot of our friendships are like, yeah, I know of a lot of people who like lurk on me and Jason like making fun of each other online and laugh at it, and it's like, that like we're legible to some extent, just like our friendships and our relationships are forming. I totally stan you guys though, because there is this again other dialectic of like, yeah, so the friendships are really fun on Twitter, but then you just get sucked more and more into the metaverse, and you guys are like, no, let's actually go into reality. And like, so I'm curious if maybe you can speak a little bit about like so the metaverse, or having online relationships is one whole thing, and then being in person with other people is a whole other thing. And like, was there any like trepidation in this like movement? Like maybe I think there is like this thing about online life where maybe I only project a certain side of myself, but then you're in person and like the whole being is there in reality. Like, I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
I think that I tend to not draw such a heavy distinction between on and offline life, and I think that contributes to it. When I see somebody really cool online, I'm like, how can I be like friends with them? And being friends may just be I interact with them online. Like gas station Barbie is a Twitter account that I considered one of my best friends, and I met her at Vibe Camp finally. But I thought of her as one of my best friends before I ever met her. I mean, we talked a lot and we shared a lot of things, and that relationship was really special to me. And but when I first got on Twitter, I was very much in the I want to find a tribe mode, and so I started meeting up with people pretty immediately. Anybody who was kind of crazy enough to meet with an unknown at that point. And eventually I got invited to a few parties, and I went to some meetups, and I never had a bad time. I've had a couple like things that were not great like later down the line, but as far as like when we started planning Vibe Camp, everything, like just these people like I met were just so incredible, and it really gave me a lot of confidence that I think pulling together like a bigger group of them could have something to it.
This seems to be something that's kind of I'm trying to think of like an historic analog of what I think is happening here, because so we've had the internet, social media for like 10 or 15 years, and it allowed us to it increased connectivity probably by orders of magnitude according to common interests, right? And people in some rural area in the middle of nowhere, they could connect up with common interests where they couldn't before, and so all of this connection is happening, and that's been great. And then we had this pandemic, and everyone's like stuck at home, and everyone's going crazy, and everyone's like super online. And now, because in Doomer Optimism, we're also talking a lot about meeting up in real life, and there seems to be a strong urge for that. And of course, you all have the Vibe Camp, and then I also heard your podcast on Becoming Creature, and having other events and local regional meetups. And it's just it's fascinating that there's like this reshuffling of humans according to interests and kind of sensibility that is now manifesting back into the world. It's actually taking on kind of an embodied form. And I'm just, it's just kind of in a very kind of abstract theoretical sense. It seems important somehow, but I don't quite know how. And so putting your kind of theorist hat on, I don't know if you have kind of like an idea of kind of the historical trajectory that that you two and your crew are really catalyzing.
One trend that I think I've seen is that, like historically, maybe even before the internet, people were much more local. They moved around a lot less, and so your community was just whatever was around you. You didn't have as much choice, but on the other hand, you had a deeper connection to it, right? Like you knew this was it. You were kind of locked in. You weren't going to change. Kind of like when you have kids, you're like, all right, they're my kids. Like, you can't get rid of them. But now we have the internet, we have Twitter, we have social media. We can really pick and choose our communities. We can be a part of so many more communities in a much like kind of in a smaller way. But also because of that, there's no good defaults, and some people maybe feel lost. You're like, I don't know which community is mine. Where do I belong? You go there, you have like one bad experience, you just go somewhere else, you don't really connect. And I think that's what's missing. Like it would be nice if you can blend the two somehow so that you can really choose the communities you want. Like that's a great thing, especially if your local communities don't fit you, but then you can really commit and dive deep into those. And we're hoping, at least with Vibe Camp, that people can dive deeper into this online community, bring it together in the real world.
Yeah, ultimately, I definitely see Vibe Camp as being a stepping stone towards those kind of communities. I don't know what it's going to look like. We're very, very experimental, exploratory kind of phase. We kind of want to just try things out and see what works. But down the line, I think that it would. I mean, it's kind of in line with my goal, and I believe Grin's goals as well, is to kind of encourage, I don't know, Twitter Village, some kind of like thing down the line where people are or maybe we just encourage regional meetups and try to build local networks. I don't know what it'll look like, but I think that's ultimately the goal. I think vibe camp style events are good to bring together the regional networks so that they can all kind of meet each other, but that it's local to you IRL interactions that are really where the real meaning can be found in life.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And I'd like to get into maybe your guys' goals, but before we or next steps that you're thinking about or whatever. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about like the actual event and some of the details of it that I'm curious about. One of them is well, we can, maybe go through some of the things that you thought were like the most successful, or the things that you would do differently, or you thought that like didn't run so great. But then I really want to know about how this like content from attendees came to be, because I love the idea of like, it's not you, Brooke, or you, Grin, or like the organizing team determining the event, but it's like everybody determines what the event is. Like, they somehow are offering up like, I don't know, I hate to say the word content because it's like so, I don't know, capitalist or something, but they're offering up experiences, curated experiences from the people attending, and it's like, come or don't. But it's almost like a microcosm of what Twitter's like. Your tweet is like, join me in this little mini experience of this topic, and then we'll riff on it or whatever. But that in real life. So I wanted to know, let's make it, maybe we could talk about that first, of like how that came to be and how it got organized.
Did you want to start with that, Grin?
Sure. Well, I think part of the secret is that there was no way we could have done it all. We, as an org team, like we're new. None of us had done anything like this before, and at the same time, we felt Ashley, what you were talking about, like people are excited to do things. Like on Twitter, people want to play games with each other. They have all these ideas, and we're like, well, great. We should let people do what they want to do. It's easier for us. It's more fun for everybody. We're not going to have all the best ideas. In fact, many of the things that happened kind of happened impromptu. Like one of the most memorable things for me was there was a boxing match, which I think they decided to do like that morning, but it was really cool. I've never been to a boxing match, and it was just a really cool idea, and it worked well. People loved it. So that's part of how it came to be. And I think part of it's also we have a strong burner influence. There are several people on the org team who like have gone to Burning Man, go regularly, organize camps. So many of the people who came are kind of from that. And in Burning Man, there's this idea of a gift culture, right? Like you come to bring a gift to other people, whether it's a physical gift or an experience or just yourself. Being attention can be a gift. So we wanted to incorporate that.
Yeah, I think there was kind of a drive to bring a Burning Man sort of experience to people who might not be able to experience it otherwise, or people we're a very neurodiverse crowd. So I think having cabins and having food there, you're not totally self-reliant, but then also having a lot of the cool experiences that you might have at Burning Man. I think it was an interesting mix, and I think it worked pretty well for the communities that we're part of.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the content curated? Again, I hate that, but like the events that happened like that from attendees, or some of your favorite, or the ones that people don't mind being legible?
Yeah, and just as a little bit of background for anybody who's trying to start their own event, I think that having a Discord server was the way to go with this. I think that was a good decision on our part, and it wasn't really well thought out at the time, but it ended up being really, really great because we were able to have different channels for different projects. People in there would be like, oh, I want to see this thing. Are you doing this? And we'd be like, what can we do to help you make that happen? Do you need resources? Do you need people? We're starting to develop a little bit of a platform, and we can help find the things that you need, but we're not going to do it for you. And I think that like, yes, there were a few different channels where people just got so excited trying to figure it. Like the badge team was incredible.
We did nothing for the badges. That was all. Yeah. That was all people who came.
And what was that? People coordinated getting badges for everybody?
Yeah, so they built a part of they coded a thing on our website for people to log in with their Twitter API and input some fields on there. So it had your Abby on it, and it had your handle, it had whatever identifying info you wanted on there, and then it had talking points on the back for the more introverted people, so they could just have something. Oh, we could talk about this, and it was such a neat thing. And 2 weeks after Vibe Camp, I was at a Rashless meetup in Austin, and someone there was wearing his Vibe Camp badge. He was just like, yeah, I wear it to all meetups now, so people know who I am. It was really,
God.
really cool. But that was just a group of people who were like, we want to see this thing. And they just worked together and figured out how to make it happen, and like told us what they needed from us. And just, it was really incredible. And I think that sort of like public-ish, I mean, Discord is public, it's not quite as public as Twitter, but this public forum where people were excited about things and doing things visibly inspired other people to get more involved. And it was kind of this cascade effect.
Yeah, I think I love that so much because there's something so fun about like inviting people into the process, like and just being like, this can be whatever you want it to be, as opposed to like, this is something I think about a lot, because my day job when there's not a pandemic is having American students come to Uruguay. And I like having them sort of co-create the experience of working alongside these farmers. Like, I don't tell them a lot in advance. I'm not like, here's this event where I've curated everything and then you just are a passive consumer of it. But instead, like you're co-producing the event, the experience, the travel, and there's a huge distinction there, I think. Sorry, Jason, you go next, but I want to know a couple details of like your favorite events that emerged. There was a dance party. I like all of this stuff is so vague to me. There was a dance party. There, what'd you say?
A tea house.
The tea house. I'd like to hear about that. Like, what was that like? And some other things, if you want to share them.
Yeah, so the tea house was very much like a burner type thing. Some of the people who put it together, like they do that at Burning Man or have done it in the past. And that was definitely one of the highlights for me, and I think for a lot of people, is there was a place where you can always go and hang out. There were like rugs and pillows on the floor, and you can nap. I spent like an hour in there, and there's somebody napping, and then a baby crawling around and just enjoying itself. There was music. I think somebody DJ'd like 24 hours straight, nonstop. And again, wasn't part of it. I think just kind of shut up and was like, "Hey, do you want someone to DJ?" And he did it. And there were tea ceremonies, which a lot of people were like, "This is amazing." What other events? So there was a tea house. There was, I think, a lot of the things that people were most excited about were very like embodied. I don't know. There were several dance classes that were a big hit. There was like folk dancing, ballroom. There was a bar that, again, two or three people ran just on their own. They were like, "Hey, we're gonna have a bar," and they ran it for 12 hours, and people loved it. It's a place to hang out. What else what stands out? There was a cuddle fort. Cuddle fort was great. That was impromptu.
Oh my God, that gives me so much anxiety. A cuddle fort, like, oh my God. It's okay. I don't think anyone. Obviously, like the other part of the culture I've noticed is like, yeah, come to it if you like it, or don't if you don't, kind of thing. Because I'm like, yeah, I traveled a lot in my 20s and was in a lot of like intentional communities, like, work exchange type things. And I've gone so far in the other direction of like being anxious about doing weird things in public, I guess. But so maybe I would have been like weird, but or have been awkward in those situations. But anyways, yeah, the cuddle fort, to me, that's like, I could never, but I'm glad it's good for you guys. Brooke,
weird things in public was our MO.
Yeah. I think like, I don't know. And then is there like a thing, like it's a party and you did weird things in public and then now you're back on Twitter? Does anyone have like social anxiety about that? Like having done a bunch of weird things in public, or is it like just the culture is like non-judgmental and it's like cool?
Are you asking us as as organizers, or trying to like imagine the experience of people who went there and did
the second
I maybe I am very low anxiety for this part of Twitter generally. So sometimes it's hard. I used to have a lot of anxiety and I don't anymore. It's hard for me to remember kind of what it's like to be
Yeah,
really anxious about a lot of those things. Yeah, I'm not sure.
that's good. I think you have a really good healthy psychological perspective to have pulled this off. It seems like I think about these meetups and I'm like super comfortable on a one-on-one or like a small group situation, but like a party like that, it's like all these different people, there's so many moving parts, like everybody's got preconceptions about how everybody else is, so like it's just really cool, I think, to me, to that you a lot of you went in with like, we're just going to have fun. Like we like to play. There's like a culture of play, it seems like to me.
Yeah.
And not a lot of judgment around that. So that's nice. All right, Jason, you go. Sorry, I've been hogging the mic.
Well, I have a couple questions, but one is and maybe speaking for yourselves, but maybe feedback you got from others. Was it meeting the people? Like, were the people kind of how you expected, or were they was it like just shattered your expectations of like, oh, this is a whole different person than they portray online? Is it like, what was that experience of like going from Abby's to people? And then also, if you've had any experience of, now that you've met them in person, going back to Abby's and interacting on Abby's, has that Twitter dynamic changed? I'm just curious if you've had observations on that.
For me personally, this is not my first rodeo as far as just meeting Twitter personalities goes. I preach a lot about like having Zoom calls, preferably IRL meetups with people. I think it gives a lot of texture, even just a Zoom call or hearing somebody's voice. And when their tweets pop up, it's a little bit more 3D. And there are a few people that were a little bit more surprising than others, but and this may just be a me thing and not an everyone thing, but I think for the most part, it wasn't so much like, oh, this is different than what I expected. It's more like this is adding to what I already had in mind. Nice. And as far as post Vibe Camp goes, I still get a thrill when I see people interacting on the timeline that I know met each other at Vibe Camp. Nice. It's like, oh, these are real friends talking to each other. There's so much context there, and I feel like engagement has really gone up for a lot of people since then, because it's harder to not like a tweet if you're like, oh, that's my friend just like talking there, and it's been really cool to watch.
Yeah, well, you interacted with that tweet yesterday. You like that tweet where, Nat and Elena met at Vibe Camp, and then, they met up in Asheville because of that and came over and visited me. So that was cool. So thanks for the nice positive externality there.
The other thing is, I really do think like there's huge potential for like cascading effects when you start to build these networks out, which is part of the reason why I think like it seems like, Brooke, like you have a sense that there's a spectrum of online to in real life. Sometimes even just DMing is a different level of connection than just interacting on the timeline versus Zoom versus, meetups or whatever, versus living in a house together. But yeah, I think there's huge potential, network effects. So that's really exciting. Grin, did you have anything to add?
So there were some of the things you said. I was also kind of worried about them going into Vibe Camp. One was, what is it going to be like when people interact in one medium and then they meet each other in a different medium? And another one was this kind of social status, like big accounts versus small accounts.
Oh, yeah.
It's like celebrity-ness. And I was pleasantly surprised on both accounts. I think there was some of that. I don't want to say it was like nothing at all. But what's nice is when you meet people in real life, often you don't know what they're like on Twitter until maybe like a little bit later in the conversation. Like you don't have to show your badge, or even if you do, like I don't know people's follower accounts. So I do think one thing that I noticed.
Have a list that you checked with like follower count, and you're like, I want to see where you stand in the hierarchy here.
We talked about sharpening it on your forehead at check-in, so everybody knows. And there, I mean, sure, there was like you meet somebody and they're like, hey, I'm this person with like 20,000 followers. You'd be like, oh, wow. But then when you start talking to them, you're like, oh, well, they're just a normal person, like they're themselves and I'm myself. And there's a number online that, represents how many people follow them. But in like an alternate universe, they could have 200 followers or whatever, or 2 million followers. And it's nice to meet people in real life and get a sense that they are just normal people, that, you know, they have normal things going on in their lives and you want to talk to them about it. And I thought that was helpful. I think it makes for deeper relationships on Twitter. You know, you can now talk to somebody and you don't just see them as, oh, a celebrity who's, you know, has a fancy life or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the cool things about the way we structured the event also, was that it was kind of like a conference, and that there were a lot of tech people there, and people did give talks and that kind of thing. We didn't have any keynote speakers. We didn't have any headliners. Everybody was kind of like, and I think you did get a lot of kind of like status within the event for bringing your own experience there, you know, whether it was you're hosting something, or, you know, the people, everyone loved the people who did the bar. Everyone loved when like people did cool dance classes and workshops and things like that. And I think that it kind of like was a way to kind of like level the playing field a little bit, where we were all kind of like there, and you know, what you brought with you was more than just your follower account, and your follower account didn't really matter in that.
That's so cool. There was talks. I didn't know that. So people gave talks, and like, how did you schedule things? Like, that's another thing, because it's like, well, if all of this stuff is like bottom up, but there does need to be some like organization of people's time and schedule. So how did you guys work that out? It's maybe a little bit minutia, but.
No, that's something, again, we definitely could do better in the future, but I thought it went reasonably well for our first shot. I will never get tired of shouting out Colby, who did a lot of that work, organizing everything, the times, the locations. And even eventually we were like, okay, well, we can't do any more. We can't keep changing the schedule. And then after that, a bunch of attendees were like, oh, we'll do our own schedule for everything that didn't make it. And there was just as many events there as there were on our schedule. So people just kind of did it. They were like, hey, we're playing board games at 4 p.m. at this place. Come by if you're interested. Or like I did a Interintellect talk, and it was like, all right, we're doing a talk. It's here. Like, meet up if you care about this kind of thing. Or there were lightning talks. There was like, there was a talk that's like, the silver lining of the war in Ukraine, like things like that, you know, kind of all over the place, whatever people wanted to talk about. And in the future, I think maybe having one schedule with everything on it would help people find stuff, because the place is really big, and I'm sure people miss stuff. I missed a ton of stuff that I wanted to go to, but the scheduling was kind of like, do you want to do it? All right, you're in, do it.
So I guess where this takes us to like major things that you thought went super well. We've talked a lot about like keeping everybody involved. Doing the Discord was a good thing. Basically saying yes to people was a really good thing. Any other things that you thought really went super well? And then we can talk about maybe lessons learned for next time.
I think, and this is another accidental thing, the cabins sort of sorting process was a huge thing. And I think that's something that we will probably focus a little bit more energy on, kind of come up with maybe a better system for the future. But that was a way for people to get to know a smaller group of people beforehand. So we knew there were going to be some cabins there. We knew roughly what size they were going to be. And so we had a couple dedicated channels in the server where people could come up with themes for them. You know, a lot of people to get kind of like an application process. You really had to get to know people. And some of the cabins had their own group chats, they did Zoom calls, and, you know, 400 people is just, you can't even meet everybody in that space of time. And so it was, I think that was a really, really cool way to both get people engaged prior to the event, but then also just have connections going in there. You have people you can kind of latch on to, like, oh gosh, we're both this like kind of overwhelming thing together. We can venture forth together. And along those lines, I also think that and this was really kind of accidental with the Airbnb thing, is something that I really want to focus on in the future too. Like, really encourage people, like maybe facilitate like people getting Airbnbs and similar, like close to each other for the week prior, the week after. That was when I had the best time. And I think that really shaped the experience for a lot of people who came early or stayed late. You know, I went into Vibe Camp already having met probably 100 of the attendees. It really took some of the pressure off of me to meet everyone there. And, Vibe Camp was a lot. It was kind of overstimulated. There was a lot going on all the time. And at these, lower key things beforehand, you had smaller groups of people. They were more intimate. You could have more meaningful conversations. I feel like, I mean, a lot of people did have meaningful conversations at Bike Camp too, but it was just a way to connect more deeply with a smaller number of people. So those are probably a couple of my favorite. What do you, Grin?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's what I most liked. And again, like people doing their own events. That was probably my favorite thing. Like I saw it, you said it was like, online we have the metaverse, but here we had kind of like a pluriverse. Like there was so many different things that whatever it is you were interested in, if you weren't having fun right now, you can just walk, 2 minutes down that way and there'll be something completely different for you.
Love that so much. I love
I
that.
like that. Yeah. And some of maybe the things I wish we did better is, I think, Ashley, if you came, we could have done better to support people who do like the one-on-one conversations, who aren't as, I know we tried to, but I think we could do even more. I think doing more icebreakers, more like helping people find the people they want to talk to, and then go over here and have a little quiet space. I think doing some of that kind of stuff is what's most on my mind for future events.
I also am really interested, and there are a couple other people on the team who are working on this already, but I'm really interested in the design aspect of things. I think that when we the cuddle floor, we found out there was an empty cabin that had like 50 beds on it, 50 mattress pads. And so we're like, we should do, I don't know if you guys have seen the show Community, but one of the episodes, they've got this big giant like blanket pillow fort that goes all through this college campus. And we're like, we should do something like that. So we built a tunnel. You had to crawl through a tunnel to go into it. We bought a bunch of supplies, but it was very, very impromptu. But it ended up being, some people said they weren't having really a good time until they went in there, because it was quiet, it was low lighting, we had string lights and things like that, and we had sheets up on the roof, this little space in there.
Wait, so it was hold on, it was a cabin just like lined with beds and sheets and lights, and it was just like a lounge basically?
Yeah, so we put sheets up from the ceiling, so it was this little small space. You had to crawl to get in, and people when it was
crawl to get in.
Yeah, we put a table in front of the doors. You had to crawl under this table to get in, and we lined it and everything. And then people, when I went by there, people had started just doing this thing where they would make like whoa noises every time somebody crawled in. It was kind of this cool ritual, and it ended up like. Yeah, and some people said that they weren't really having a great time there until that space happened, because the tea house was very, very crowded. It was amazing, but it was like a lot of people there all the time. It didn't have space for everybody, and so I think going forward, like now we know to be a little bit more intentional about making sure. Like I'm one of those people. I learned in Austin. I pretty much only go to parties to find those like chill, quiet spaces where I can actually talk to people. I love popping by the dance parties. I love, popping by the more intellectual discussions, but the more like emotional, intimate conversations are really what energizes me. And I want to be a little bit more careful about just beforehand designing spaces so that people have whatever space they kind of need in that moment to go to there.
Taken care of. Yeah. Jason, do you have anything?
I mean, I have something that would kind of change the subject. So if you have anything else on this.
No, just like maybe more any other like, well, I guess we should probably broach the subject of like some people have said that they had negative experiences, like, and so maybe you guys, I heard you talk about it on Nick's podcast a little bit, but maybe can talk a little bit about how you guys are thinking through like safety in the community and how to pursue this, because I think like there is a level of like openness and a limited barrier to entry, but then of course, like, with any community, with any social interaction, you have some risk. And so of course you guys can't make a completely risk-free world, and that doesn't exist really, but what are you guys thinking about? How are without revealing anything you don't want to talk about, but how are the internal discussions playing out with this?
Do you want to start with that one, Grin? I have a couple of things to say, but
sure. Yeah, I mean, you've been doing more of it, so go for
it. So we just internally, we've got a process where a few different times I would tweet, the team would tweet, like, let us know if there are people that we should be aware of from a safety standpoint. And what we've been doing so far is just roughly, if somebody's flagged to our attention, I watch the attendee list if people have purchased a ticket, and if there was no conflict, I didn't take any action. I kind of make note of it, but it's kind of like in a like this has not been investigated at all, section. And then if there was a conflict, and that only happened twice, then I do a little bit more research. One of the cases was a doxing thing, so I could just go look at his blog, and that was pretty easy to research. So it was only two people. We did ask them not to attend, and we refunded their money. And that's something that we are going to probably build on as we move forward. Try to find. I think that's one of the services that we can offer. We haven't really started talking about like next steps yet, but one of the things we want to do is kind of be a resource for people who want to do their own events of whatever scale. And I think that's one of the things that we can offer if we can figure out a way to do it that's respectful to people's privacy, but then it's also, if people want to know who our ban list is, maybe they can send us their list of attendees and we can let them know if there are any flags. I'm not sure what that would look like. I don't know really the best way to do that, but it's something that we've been discussing. Also, just on a personal level, one of my side projects right now is a podcast about safety and dating, boundaries, those kind of things, and I'm really, really excited about it. I'm not sure how soon it's going to be a thing. It's kind of more someone else's thing, but I'm not sure he's ready to like talk about it yet. But I'm really, really excited about it. I think that the people involved will have like fairly nuanced takes on things. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's in the works. I'm very excited.
Yeah. So one of the challenges, especially with our community, is that there is this culture of like being anonymous or being, an Avi. And so we want to respect that. We want people to be, as public or private as they want to be. And also we want to do this thing where we protect people, or we have a sense of like, hey, this is something that happened that people should know about. So it's tough balancing the two. I don't know where the answer is. We kind of have to discover it.
Yeah, I think that's probably my take, at least, is just that we're in like a weird world that doesn't have like a lot of precedent for solving these kinds of issues. And I think you can neither completely eliminate risk nor completely ignore it. I think like there's probably somewhere in between, and you have to figure out like appropriate ways to move forward. Like I do think there's some danger in like naming and shaming, like this person did this thing, and then there's like there's no real judge for that. It just becomes this like swarm but then there has to be some sort of comeuppance and like flags, even if it has to happen privately and like quietly or something like that. And people can navigate these things. A lot of these conflicts can be really nuanced, where there's two sides. Sometimes it's just a bad actor acting, but sometimes there's like confusion. And so anyways, I think you guys are really thoughtful, and I think it's a good thing to think about and just be like engaging with. But I
just need a social credit score. I mean, so obvious.
Everything can be reduced to a number, and then you just optimize for the number. Yeah, easy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right, so Jason, you go in a different direction.
Yeah, well, so I've been playing with this concept of world building, and I feel like we need kind of like this kind of world building. And a lot of people talk about kind of this culture is kind of atomizing, and we all enjoyed our individuality, but then we all became kind of isolated, and the pandemic reinforced that. And so, I think the future belongs to world builders, and I definitely think your crew is a world building crew. And so maybe let's talk about the world that you see kind of emerging here, in the rough outlines. Of course, you don't want to overdetermine it right now, but like what, and this could get into some of the plans for future events and kind of where it's going, but related to, again, to this concept of, we're creating these worlds, right? These people are meeting there. Some of them could, get hitched up, they could have kids, they could start living together, living next to each other. Like there's worlds that are building, and it's this networked across space, across, interests, but it's also, like planting seeds in a way of new communities and things. So yeah, feel free to take it, take that in any direction you want. I'm curious.
I feel like I speak on this a lot, so I want to hear Grin's answer. But just first, I wanted to say I'm here in LA looking for places. I'm going to move in, hopefully very soon, with a group of people that I stayed with in Airbnbs in Austin. So I kind of like that came directly out of my podcast. So that's very exciting. But go ahead, Grin.
Yeah, we have a lot of ideas, and I'm one of the things I'm most excited about going forward is exploring all of them or some of them. We don't have time to do all of them probably, but seeing what resonates, doubling down on those. Maybe trying. Probably going to make some mistakes along the way, but that's okay. I'm happy about that. The world I see us building is more than just running events. Like I think that'll be a big part of it. I think people want to get together, and I think we're good at that. At least so far, we have been. But there's a lot more to it. There's this idea of vibing. That's another kind of community thing. It was big at Vibe Camp. That's why we named it. The name came from, we ran a survey and we asked people what they wanted to do, and almost everyone was like, just vibe. Like that's what we care about. And so I want us to support that, whether that's events, whether it's podcasts, a newsletter, people getting together, creating a space that has a certain vibe, or like, throwing a party where rooms have different vibes. There's so many different things, supporting other people who are kind of doing similar things, walking the same path with us. That's plays a big role in the world I see going forward, is like encouraging vibing.
Yeah,
so
we want. Oh, sorry.
sorry. You go.
Just real briefly, we want to try to build up some infrastructure as we do events ourselves. We want to eventually make public we haven't really consolidated notes from our process, but we want to like open source what we did. We want people to be able to do this, even if they're not us. Like we want more of this happening in the world. And when we start doing, we want to start doing smaller scale events as well. Maybe we'll have our own ticketing platform, and we can have it so that people who are kind of vetted within the community who want to do their own thing can just use our stuff, so that it's easier for them. And then I'm also, I've had a few people reach out to the team about they're doing local things and they want, advice from us. So we've opened ourselves up to like being there. I'm going to have a weekly call with, I don't know if she wants you to say who she is, but somebody who's running an event soon. And just so I can answer questions about what we did. We don't know that much yet. We're not like super professional at this, but we have, we have some ideas on like what worked for us, what didn't, and just to be there as a resource for the community in whatever capacity that ends up working out, I think is kind of part of that.
Nice.
I love that. And the other thing that I don't know, there's two things. One is I actually think vibe is a useful concept, even among people who might be, I'm thinking my friend Josh Helling, who's a Gen Xer, and he's like, I'm like, Josh, it's all about the vibe. It's all about the vibe. And he's like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you've gotten me to like, just use the word vibe. But it is like, there is something to, if to put it in more normie terms, like this embodied experience that has a certain tenor to it, and like a certain resonance among the people having it. It could come in a conversation, it could come in a setting, or like a combination of both. And I think, part of what we talk a lot about in Doomer Optimism, I think a lot of people are involved in like land-based activities, and there's a vibe to, cleaning out the chicken coop. There's a vibe to, like there's like a lot of embodied experiences that come as a result of a certain set of activities. So I think like that's good. And I'm just so glad that you guys are normalizing talking about that, because it's definitely bleeding over. And then the other thing is like, I just think the infrastructure piece is so huge. Like just laying the groundwork. I think sometimes I've heard people say something along the lines of like, yeah, I mean, Vibe Camp, like whatever, it's just an adult retreat. Like they're not doing anything special, but it's not just an adult retreat. Like you're co-creating a culture. And I think a lot of people underestimate, like they want to just minimize, like it's just this, like it's just event planning, or it's just whatever. But I think it is like weaving together a mix of already existing tools, and culture, and like being responsive to the culture and curation and empowering people to be involved. That is totally new, I think. Not the individual parts, but all of it together is, I don't know. I'm just, there's not a question, just observation. Yeah, so I don't know, like hear more about like, yeah, what I mean, people living together, local meetups, like, you know, the buying some land, like, are there any details emerging from this, or are you just kind of like slowly building the infrastructure and seeing like what populates it?
I think it was definitely worked out well for us to stay fairly open and flexible with Vibe Camp. We kind of, we shifted track a couple of times in our approach and how we thought we were going to be doing things. And I think that was good. And so I kind of like, I think it's good for us to keep doing that a little bit and have some like broad strokes where we kind of like these things, but not put ourselves into too many hard boxes too early on. Yeah. That being said, I mean, we've got George on our team is working with Loophole Kid, who they're going to be putting out an event calendar very soon, just like consolidated. And I don't know too many details about that particular project, but I think that's something there's a need for with how geographically distributed everybody is, to find local things that are happening. Not everybody knows about things, so we can have a place where people know to check. I think that would be really cool. They're also working on things like doing a group house finder. That may just be in our Discord server. I'm not sure where that's going to go. For people to find people to live with. I definitely think that like Vibe Camp, regional meetups, whatever, I think those feel like midway steps to me. Like the ultimate goal is to live with the community. And I don't know what we can do to facilitate that happening, but I definitely see like, short to midterm, a lot of things like this as we kind of like help get people used to the idea that, oh, there are people who share our values and we like being around them. We want to be around them more. And they kind of just like nudging that up a little bit. I don't know what you have to say about that, Grin.
Yeah, well, actually, buying land is something we talked about very early on. I don't know where, like, it's a lot more work than I think we're ready to do like today. But it may not end up being specifically buying land. It may be more like the idea of having a home for the community. But yeah, it's been something we've talked about. I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but it's something we'd like. There's also like kind of the way we found the venue that we used for this event was we talked to a DAO that is involved in like creating locations where people can come together. I think a lot of that, like my background, a lot of it's in crypto, at least most recently. And there's a lot of that kind of energy and like people finding each other online and then doing things in the real world together. Like you talked about world building. This is like a huge theme in like creating these stories about what our community is about and how we can manifest them. So yeah, definitely. These things are all, I want to say yes to everything that you're suggesting. If there's people listening to this, like we want to help you. If something speaks to you and you're like, I'm doing that, totally reach out to us. We like Brooke knows pretty much everyone on Twitter at this point. If you're looking to find other like-minded people, we can help you with that. If you're looking for some kind of resources or coordination or whatever we can do, we want to help you. Let us know.
Nice. I'm curious if you want to go in a little bit more about kind of the evolution of this community in terms of, so it's called, before it was called TPOT and in group, it was called post-rats, and post-rats being post-rationalists. And so there was a lot of people, we mentioned a lot of people that are in tech, a lot of people are programmers, a lot of people that had this kind of explicit rationalist point of view, and post-rat was kind of like this departure of like, hey, we need more vibes, like we need embodiment, we need like this. It's not just propositions that we're trading back and forth. It's there's some other kind of relational thing that we need to cultivate. I'm just curious if you have thoughts of like now, what the evolution of like now this world building, vibing, like coming from a place of maybe more, you could say more heady, right? I'm just how you see that evolution.
Go ahead, Grin.
I'm not an expert on this. I think that there are people who have been around kind of for the whole maybe 10 plus years of this community who have that sense, who can tell that story. I think that what you described is like a story we like to tell ourselves about how it happened. Yeah. I don't know if it really happened that way or if it was more like, hey, people like to hang out with each other, and so there's a community. And I know this like rats versus post rats thing comes up every once in a while, and people love to fight about it. And I just do not like. That feels too simple. Although it feels, somewhat true. I think there is. I think Rival wrote like the canonical Substack about it. And I think there's a lot of, it feels right. Although again, if you ask kind of the older school rationalists, they will say that, we've never, it's kind of weird to just kind of abandon your emotions. It's not that. But yeah, I think this story that you, as you laid it out, is like part of it. It's the theme.
Yeah.
My general impression, this could be wildly off. I'm not super confident in this. I only joined Twitter in July of 2020. So it was already, the pandemic was happening. A lot of people, I think, came during that time. My impression was that it was largely kind of like, I think of in-group as being the rationalist crowd. Mostly that's where that term originates from, if I'm not mistaken. It's largely a bunch of rationalists. And I think post-rats were, okay, I may not be confident in this enough. I don't know. The pandemic brought a bunch of new people in, and it kind of like shook things up a little bit and changed the nature of what was going on here. Is my guess.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, there's like the EA crowd. They're, I think, a big part of in group. And I think if you ask, like most people probably know, about Slate Star Codex, about Less Wrong. Like they've probably read it, even if it wasn't like they read all the sequences. They maybe read some of it because it's good writing, besides being just like a core rationalist thing.
Yeah.
Or the meme with the pepperoni airplane is a big meme.
It's so weird. Like, yeah, I just like want to point out that it's so weird. You have like a canon, you have like a canonical piece, or like things that people within the community have read, and it's like there is like this whole online world that is just like in humans, and then their humans are now like catapulting that into reality and like homes and relationships. And I mean, this is a theme we keep coming back to, but it's like it really is crazy and interesting to go into the metaverse and then take that back out. The other question I have is maybe like a downer question, but like the practical realities of community building, like who pays for what, and you buy some land and who's managing it, and is there a septic system at things. Obviously, like you'll get there and maybe there will be enough trust and like coordination built. You guys seem like really capable and practical, able to handle practical like realities, but I think there is something where I maintain a skepticism about like, kids or family and the practical realities of raising children. And like everybody wants a, community to raise children in, but it takes a lot of trust, to handle the practical realities of that. And I think, so I'm just wondering if you guys are thinking about that at all, because it's like the joke of intentional communities is like everybody wants to be the mayor, but nobody wants to like, manage the sewage system, but somebody has to manage the sewage system at the community. So those kind of questions, I wonder if you guys have thought about.
Yeah, we'll just make them the mayor. You're right. It's hard. And, we're not the first people to try and do it. Tons of people have tried to do it, and sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. It may not work out for us. Maybe we'll be a lesson to someone else about how to do it wrong and to do things differently.
Maybe you'll be less wrong.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, and I think, there is also something too, like, it seems to me, slow experimentation, trying things bit by bit, and like building up not just trust, but like infrastructure and lessons each time. And I think there is something really, really smart about that approach. And then learning about like, experiences from the past and what can we take from the ways people have failed in the past and that kind of thing, if we're going to get serious about this. But I was just wondering if you guys are like talking about those details internally at all.
Yeah, not too much in terms of like actual hard details, but I do like what you just said spoke to me a little bit about like scaling things up a little bit. I think that one thing that kind of helped us was, and it was surprising that it helped us, was that we didn't have a location picked. We were kind of stalled on that for a long time last fall. And in that meantime, we kept having meetings and we kept discussing like, okay, what can we do with the Discord server? What can we do with our Twitter account? What can we do with this and that? And we kind of built up a lot of the infrastructure that we ended up using down the line once things became kind of a lot more hectic with fear selling tickets, things like that. We already kind of had this like groundwork that we had done in the meantime. And I feel like that's kind of part of what we're doing now with these smaller events. We're going to build things out with this like larger goal kind of in mind. Like, you know, if we need to build a thing, maybe we will build it so that it can work for some kind of like resource skill sharing on site, or I don't, you know, who knows what that's going to look like. But over time, as we do these little things, and then also as I have more conversations with people and the team does, you know, people reach out to us and like, oh, we like this thing, we want to talk to you about this thing. And I just, you know, little bits over time, I feel like it's kind of just like adding little layers. And yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of room for like people with different skills, just like with Vibe Camp itself, with people kind of stepping up and hosting events. You know, people with different skills, you know, like they're just gonna, you know, if you're making your presence felt, if you're accessible, then, you know, I'm optimistic that you know, somebody will step up and say, hey, I can help you with this, right? I can help you with, you know, this septic, you know, in this cool, innovative way, right? Or yeah, it doesn't seem like something that you need to, you know, micro project on right now. It seems like that's the whole point of kind of an emergent community, is that you're iterating, but you're also constantly surprised by, oh, there's this new affordance that, you know, this person is offering, and that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very much been the story of Vibe Camp. I think a lot of stuff is like, maybe you could say like the vibe provides, right? Like we need it, and then it kind of appears, mostly by being public about it, being earnest about the idea that we want to do this. You know, it wasn't like an ironic, like, oh, Vibe Camp, haha, like I hope.
Right.
We were just like, all right, we're doing it. It's definitely happening, you know.
Right.
And
Vision
people,
is there, and
yeah,
that the vibe that attracts, yeah.
Yeah.
But there is something.
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna say there is something to like to like being the grown up in the room too. Like, and I'm speaking like you guys are the grown ups in that people are like, yeah, I wish. And then you're like, no, but like, let's actually do it and figure out how to make it happen. There is a particular subset of actor who is making it happen. And I think like aware of and engaging with the practical challenges, you know, and that like, and actually doing the thing and not just like imagining about it. So yeah, I mean, you guys seem like really, it's really great how well this turned out. You know, when I think my issue on you know, people in the metaverse is like everybody wants to just like have a utopian vision, but nobody wants to like figure out the practical realities of it. So it's like, yeah, what a great success. No question there. Just
one of the things that's been super rewarding for me is when I get feedback from people. Like I can't, someone, I forgot who it was on Twitter the other day. It was like, you've given me no excuse to not do things ever again. I
love that.
Seeing that kind of like reflected across, like, oh, we really can just like do the things, like make the things happen that we want to see in the world. It's really meaningful to be a part of, like kind of like people showing that that's possible.
Actually, that's a great transition, because I wanted to ask about kind of like if this you relate this at all to theory of societal change. So like in Doomer Optimism, we kind of in the name, it's like, yeah, a lot of our institutions really suck right now. You know, a lot of us are environmentalists. We're worried about, you know, ecological climate things, you know, political institutions. So we're like, yeah, we're kind of like doomed. But, you know, with that kind of like recognition, then it's like, oh, but, you know, we can carve out a more beautiful, you know, maybe the current society is crumbling, but we can make a new society, right? In its ashes, right? Something else can kind of arise up. And it seems like what you just said about like, hey, we can actually do things. We can make the society, at least on smaller scales, but then we can network with each other and you know, make the society we want to see in the world. And I'm curious I mean, you kind of already said it, but if you want to talk more about seeing this related to larger societal change, and kind of theory of change of like, you know, humanity, you know, kind of thinking like picture how you think about that.
I kind of feel like, when people talk about, oh, I want to, burn it down, we should start over. Like, I kind of think this is how you do it. You do it on a really small individual scale and then just kind of step it up a little bit as you go. I don't know if you have things you want to say about that, Grant, but I'm very excited by that idea. And I think that it's possible that like new forms of governance will come out of these kind of local clusters as they interact and grow over time. And I'm not saying we're going to do anything like that, but who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to come out of all this stuff when people collaborate, when people like earnestly work towards a shared vision of a better world. Yeah, it's all really exciting.
That's so awesome, because I feel like you described exactly kind of how we think about it as well. Of like, we're not pushing for like large scale change, but like I think more in terms of broad scale change, of like small scale, step it up. But if it's happening all over the place and you're networked, then it can build and build, and if they're starting to connect, it can be a figure ground reversal at some point, and that's exciting. So thanks for articulating that.
Yeah, for me, sorry, Grin, you go.
Sure. So I think institutions are kind of like people. Like they're born, they age, and eventually they die. Like we shouldn't be surprised that that's what's happening. Yeah. And as they die, they make room for new institutions. So like we're kind of, you said we're like the adults, but as Vibe Camp as a thing, we're like the kids. We're coming up, we're like trying to do something that's a little different. Maybe we're rebelling against our parents because we didn't like the way that they did things. But we're also not like, all right, let's kill the parents. The parents are great. They're really helpful. They're just a little bit older, a little bit different, a little bit more ossified. They're not as flexible, and the world's changing. So I'm happy that we're growing these new communities. And like you said, right, we don't just do it everywhere. We do a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. We try different things, and whatever works, that we double down on that. Yeah. And eventually, those will become the new institutions, the new norms.
I love this. Yeah, I mean, it definitely resonates a ton. I'm so glad you guys came on, because we're thinking about this, and I think basically there's probably some overlap in the Venn diagram of doomer optimism and this part of Twitter, but like there's also different vibes. So it'd be cool if we're like, simultaneously hosting events, little events and little meetups. Just the other day, some people were talking about getting people to come to their homesteads and do like a work day, like a barn raising or whatever, build a stone wall, whatever it is. But would be really cool if we are like twin organizations building up these little networks and maybe checking back in periodically, lessons learned and ways in which we could share ideas on open source governance models. These kinds of things would be really cool.
I'm too excited to speak right now. It's like I love that.
All right, well. Anything else that we haven't covered that you feel like you want, the world to know about, share with your networks once we post this, that you guys are excited about or that you just want to say out loud, like put on the record?
A question that you just wish somebody would ask you that they're just missing this obvious question that you want to answer. Yeah.
I have questions for you.
Sure.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I know less about, and maybe I don't know who on our team would know best, maybe nobody, is the history of all this stuff. Like I think what we know about community building is what we've seen ourselves, but we don't know how these things happened in the past. How have communities dealt with things like becoming bigger than they were ready for, like being kind of taken over by people who want to extract value as opposed to do the core thing. Like, and I think you study this stuff. So how has it worked in the past? Like, what are the things that you think we should be careful about?
Oh my God, like that's such a big question, because like what we're talking about is so, like, I keep saying this, but it's different from historically how it's been done. But like, for example, there's a lot of, at least a model for doomer optimism would be like hippie intentional community. And a lot of times what happens is people try to change too many social norms too quickly. So they're like just reinventing everything at once. And then, then there's just what happens. There's this like joke kind of about how these hippie communes work out, where like all the time is spent in group meetings talking about how we should do things. You know what I mean? Like we're just all the time sitting around talking about how money should be spent, who should be doing what work, like, you know, all of these things that you really can't, you have to bring in some sort of social norms as like a basis, or if you're going to build new social norms, it has to be little by little, you know. And I think the way you guys are doing it is good, but there is a danger in that, because you're all new people with all different social contexts, and you're going to come together, and now you have to have some sort of basic understanding of like what is acceptable behavior, which is something that is traditionally built over centuries, like in a place with a culture. And then there's ways in which those norms get policed by people. One of my favorite ways that norms are policed is like a town dance, and on the outside of the dance are like old women watching everybody dance, because they're just like people, you know, old women like to like keep people in line, and like you know they're watching, so you have to like manage your behavior, because they're like the police basically. If you're like grabbing somebody's ass or something at the dance, you'll be chastised somehow, you know, by the old lady somehow through the grapevine. These kind of things where like, you know, there are norms set over time traditionally, so you've got to like just be aware that there's certain acceptable social behavior. You got to decide what it is, and not try to reinvent too many things at once. Those are my 2 cents. I don't know. I'm just speaking as a sociologist now. Jason, do you have insight?
I mean, I think we're going through the same process of figuring that out.
Yeah.
We haven't had this kind of scale event. So I think in many ways, you're kind of ahead of us in kind of these learning. But we have often like there's a big debate about intentional communities, as Ashley said, versus just kind of this organic evolution of like, you know, should I, you know, a lot of us are interested in like eco villages or homesteads and things. And the question is like, should I go join an eco village or try and start one, or should I just move somewhere and then meet my neighbors and try and like, you know, integrate with that community, but also bring in new ideas in my own culture, and you know, I'm connected to this larger network, so maybe I could be of value. And I think a lot of us tend to lean towards the latter of like, you know, there's the one conversation we had of like, what's the minimum viable design criteria of communities, right? Where like you just want to let things emerge, and you don't want to like, you know, like intentional communities again don't have a great track record, like most of them. And so, but at the same time, we don't want to just like all of us are isolated and we're all kind of moving to, you know, a lot of us are kind of rural, you know, inclined, and so just move out in the middle of nowhere and try and get to know our neighbors who probably hate us anyway because they've been there for generations. That probably doesn't work either. So like, where's this kind of like happy place of, you know, somewhere in between? We're just figuring it out.
And I would say like our approach so far has been, I really like the idea of people just settling in some place near other people who are, you know, they want to be near, like just neighborhoods, you know, like you just buy a house, then you don't have to like agree about how our land gets used. You just are a neighbor, and we see each other, we hang out, we play board games, whatever. And then, but that simultaneously, which is like a pretty intense relationship because you're choosing to settle near each other, with these like regional meetups occasionally, maybe, you know, national meetups once a year, you know, as like camp friends. It's a real model. Like you have your camp friends you see every year, and they're not the people you see every day, but you see them once a year and you look forward to it, and you always bunk together, and, you know, and they're like your best friends for during that week or whatever, and then that's it. So I think there's just like a lot of models to experiment with, and they can be at different scales, and we can just, you know, see how community emerges, and there can be like multiple, you know, visions that are experimenting with at once.
And there should be. I think like if we want to make real change in the world, we got to have a bunch of different people all trying the different things and figuring out what works, because one thing that works for one group of people may not work for another. Like there are going to be things that work really well for certain kinds of people and not for other kinds of people. And if we could just do all the things,
right. As many experiments as possible, and the ones that really work, then you can maybe there will be diffusion if it's appropriate in the new context. And but that's I like that. I mean, just speaking for myself, so like my family moved to like rural area, but we live near a university town, so it's kind of the best of both worlds there. But I've used Twitter a lot to like, now we're starting to form like regional, friend groups, and we're gonna, visit each other and help each other out on projects and things. And so, I'm really enjoying that particular model of like, I came here just kind of like, this is just kind of middle of nowhere. I haven't really been here before, but using this kind of network, I am finding other people in the region, and we're hanging out. And I'm hoping to like eventually like attract some of my online friends. It's like, hey, there's a place for sale over there. We could like live next to, so like bringing some of them in as well. Yeah, but it's not something that happens overnight for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, wait, there's one other question. You mentioned something, Brooke, on the Nick's podcast, that Grin, there's something about like tagging. Am I saying the word right? You said like Grin's working on some like tagging project or something.
I mentioned the meta label thing.
Meta label.
I apologize, Grin, if I should not have done that.
Is that not ready for airtime? Do you want to describe what that is?
I kind of already described it. There's so the meta label concept is something that's kind of new. The Yancey Strickler, he's the founder of Kickstarter, and he left a while ago, like a year or two ago. He was kind of like, trying to figure out what he wants to do next. And this is his story, his world building story, that there are like music labels, right? They release like CDs or things, but you can also have labels that like promote an idea versus a product. And so actually music labels kind of do it, right? There's like a punk label, right? Or there's the ska label. And so you can have a thing that's like a label that promotes an idea, and it does it in a bunch of different ways. It could be, and so I think Vibe Camp could follow that model. Like we promote this idea of vibing or of deep community, deep engagement with other people, potentially like coming from the internet to the real world, but maybe it doesn't have to be. And that whatever we're doing is that, it's different from Vibe Camp as an organization that runs events. It's Vibe Camp tries to make this thing happen. We don't have to do it all, but we want to work with anybody who is going in that vein. Maybe we have releases the same way labels do, right? They release an album, we release an event, we release a story, we release a podcast, whatever it is. We release a micro grants process. And that's the vision that I kind of had for how something that Vibe Camp might do. And we've been talking about it a ton. I think there's a bunch of people are into it internally. I think people would be into it externally. We just haven't talked about it that much. So that's, yeah, I don't love the name meta label. Like I think it kind of inspires a different idea than what it really is. But the concept itself is really interesting to me.
How do people like reach out to you if they like that idea, or would they just stay tuned and see when you guys start inviting people into thinking about that more?
No, reach out about it at Grin_IO on Twitter, or at TPOT Vibe Camp, at Brooke, at GPT Brooke. Sorry. We'll get at Brooke someday. Yeah, totally. Come talk to us. I think
I love that.
Yeah, we're very open.
We also have team email addresses, just if people have longer messages or don't use Twitter as much. Grin at vibecamp.xyz, or Brooke at vibecamp.xyz, or team at vibecamp.xyz if you wanted to go to all of us.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I'm very excited to see how it goes. I wish you all the best. I'm definitely cheerleading. We both are, I would say. And thanks for coming on.
I'm taking notes too, because we're thinking a lot. I think a lot along similar lines, and it seems like you're doing a lot of innovative stuff. So we're definitely taking notes, and we might steal some things. So just FYI.
Yeah, I'd love it if you did.
Yeah, I'm so excited we came on. This is really neat to talk to you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing what ways we can work together, help each other in the future.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you at the next Vibe Camp.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to go. We have to go, Jason. We just have to go.
We have to represent. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, have a good one. Thank you so much. This was lovely. We'll be in touch. We'll let you know. We have a little bit of a backlog on releasing, but we'll let you know and tag you when it comes out.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks for having us on.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.